Thank you for tuning in to Beauty Unfiltered. I'm your host, Jocelyn Dias. This is a 3-part mini-series of a podcast focusing on how different forms of media, social media, advertising, and TV and film all feed us ideas about women's bodies and how they should look. On today's episode, we will be talking about the impact Instagram has on beauty standards and how these social media messages are impacting younger kids than ever before. Instagram is one of the most heavily used social media platforms today by Gen Z. 59% of teens between the ages of 13 and 17, and 78% of people in general between the ages of 18 to 29 use Instagram most frequently, according to the Pew Research Center. This is detrimental to the mental health of all genders within this demographic, particularly girls who are easily influenced at such a transformative age. This is also the youngest group of people to ever enter the social media realm, so people are not always as prepared on how to have these conversations with young people about how to navigate social media. Instagram in particular is known for its extensive filters, body modifications in posts, and influencers that promote these issues. A study by Frederica Padolino and Anne-Linda Camerini examined the correlation between Instagram use and body dissatisfaction in a survey given to 291 participants. From these results, they used structural equation modeling to determine that scrolling on Instagram was indeed associated with higher levels of body dissatisfaction, mainly as a result of comparison to influencers. That was the biggest part of Instagram that they found was detrimental, was the influencers that popped up on their feed. Instagram Face is a concept that circulates around the app, meaning that filters are used to alter the user's faces, and that gives them the flawless skin. They make their eyes a little bigger, noses smaller, can really modify anything about themselves. And there's an article called The Fight for Instagram Face that describes that filters are more likely to trend if they deform the user's face to a greater extent. So the more that the filter plays around with their features, the more popular the filter is, believe it or not. A particular filter mentioned in this article, called Vedette Plus, was viewed 130 million times and used over 1.2 million times in 3.5 months. Just 3.5 months! And millions of people, and probably the same people, recirculating to use this app. Influencers play a key role in strengthening these trends, as once an Instagram influencer uses these filters, then their followers use the filters as well, and they decide that that's cool because this influencer did it, despite how detrimental that can be. So, for example, with that Vedette filter, Bella Hadid used it, and that is how it circulated so many millions of uses and views. There are efforts to fight the toxicity of Instagram, however, through a few efforts, including getting rid of filters such as this one. The Vedette filter in particular was taken away, and trends in 2023 that revolve around beauty focus more on how to address skin problems at the root versus using filters to cover them up. So that talks about good skincare routines and face washes to use. This still has its issues because it still does promote if you have flawless skin naturally, it'll still make you more beautiful. So there are still some issues, even though it is positively moving in that direction. But there are definitely efforts starting to combat using all these filters and all this makeup, which is definitely a step in the right direction. There's a new concept actually that started because of these efforts called skinimalism, which focuses on better skincare routines and addressing all of these insecurities at the source rather than covering them up. In 2023, skinimalism amassed 42,283 Instagram hashtags, according to an article by Sophie Smith. An Instagram page with 2.4 million followers, known as The Female Lead, is also taking initiative to post content that promotes women of all colors, sizes, beauty levels, everything. So they really try to not only promote those women, but also post educational content about how social media works and about influencers. And they currently, like I said, have 2.4 million followers. So their efforts are definitely being seen and shared and recirculated. While Instagram has made efforts to move in a less filter based direction, it has already taken its toll on Gen Z. Here to talk more about this topic is Northeastern University psychology student Anastasia Yang.
Hi.
Thank you so much for joining today.
Yes.
So, we are here to talk about social media and the impact it has on young girls. And our first question about that topic, young girls are getting exposure to social media at earlier ages. How have you noticed this earlier exposure impacting their development and self esteem?
Yeah, so first, I just think like it's important to acknowledge like the other ways that other generations have been exposed to like, issues with their bodies and stuff. And I obviously can't speak on like the older generations than myself, but at least for us, our generation, I feel like a lot of it is having to do with like the people in our lives. Like those people are also getting information about their bodies from other people telling them what is right, what isn't. And also like our toys when we were younger, such as like Barbie dolls. I feel like that has a lot of impact on like how we should look like. Like the toys that we see are when we're younger are like things that we're exposed to that tell us how we should be, how we should look like. And then that's obviously like changed a lot for this newer generation. A lot of kids now are on social media, like even I would say more than playing with toys and stuff. Um, and just like having that increased presence on social media just exposes them to so many things. It exposes them to different makeup trends, having certain body figures. I think I'm a mentor to third to fifth graders, and we have some conversations in those mentoring sessions about their bodies. And a lot of the times they talk about being on TikTok and seeing bodies on TikTok and how their bodies don't look like that. And I think it's also important to acknowledge like one way we worked to combat that was talking like, what are we thankful for our body? So we had them go around and say one thing that they're thankful for their body. Like, I'm thankful that I can walk, or, anything that they're thankful for. And, but, seeing that was like kind of heartbreaking because they're so young and they already have these ideas of what is normal, of what they should look like. Um, but I also have younger sisters, and I can definitely see how social media has affected them. Not just like famous celebrities, but their friends being on social media also impacting how they want other people to see their bodies. Um, but even with social, like influencers and stuff, I think they serve as a role model for a lot of young girls. And when they promote things like certain body standards or certain beauty standards, I feel like it plays a lot into what young girls expect for themselves. And I think that's why it's important for us as the older generation to set an example for that younger generation, that it's okay to have, differences in our body. That's what makes us unique, and that's what makes us, human, being different. But yeah.
That was great. You had mentioned like the Barbie dolls and like the toys that we get exposed to when we're younger. Social media kind of takes that to the next level and like shows that you can look like a Barbie doll on Instagram if you want. So toys definitely have an impact on that. And I feel like that's like for all the children, like all these action figures just have such like different features as it goes through time. Like, different certain parts of them get bigger, certain parts get smaller, and kids are seeing that and how people can do that to themselves on the internet. You also mentioned like mentoring young kids and how TikTok has really affected them. Have they ever shared anything like specifically about what they see on TikTok that they want their bodies to look like with you?
Um, so I also mentor like mostly Black students. So race also becomes a play into that, and how they want their bodies to look like, you know, uh more from what they see. So a lot of white people, a lot of thin bodies too. I think a big issue for them was just like achieving that thinness, but they're they're in fifth grade and they really shouldn't be worrying about that.
No, yeah, I absolutely agree. They shouldn't. They have so many other things to worry about. Middle school is such an interesting time in your life, and worrying about these impossible standards really takes that toll. What have you noticed from your own experience with your own life about body image on social media?
Yeah. So I think for me, I wasn't allowed on social media till I was in 10th grade, which I feel has been good for my own development. I think definitely, especially when I entered high school, like it was kind of a strange transition period for me because I went to a charter school, and when I went into the high school, most of the kids were not from my charter school. So I was, meeting a lot of new people. And so I think I was pretty vulnerable at that time to change. And I do think that if I was on social media, it probably would have affected like seeing other people, just even seeing other people interact with other students, it like social media just has such a large presence in our lives that I think like those connections would make me feel like I was left out if I didn't have them. But in terms of body image, definitely when you're in high school, you go through a lot of changes in life. Your body is changing, everyone around you is changing. You're making a transition in your life to an adult as well. So I think at that time you're just so vulnerable to change, and I think it's good to be exposed to social media so you can like develop a sense of yourself, and so you can work on that, that balance that's equal, but maybe with the help of like a parent you can create that balance.
Absolutely. So you mentioned getting social media a little bit later than most people, even in our generation, get social
Yeah.
media. Did anybody ever give you like a hard time about not having social media until high school or being like, how did you make it so long? Because I know I've heard that one before.
Yeah, I think at least for me, a lot of people would ask me for my social media, and I would just be like, I don't have a phone or I don't have social media. But it was never anything that I would make a big deal out of because I didn't have it, so I didn't really feel like I was missing out that much because I, I didn't have it, my siblings didn't have it, so it just felt normal to me.
But then you have younger siblings, and you said that they're kind of getting on earlier now. So
Yeah,
you're kind of
definitely.
noticing that generational shift right in your own household. What has that been like?
I think um I've gotten into a little argument with my younger sister. She's in 10th grade right now, but she was on TikTok a lot, and she was just like over sexualizing her body on TikTok and on a public account. And like I do think like teenagers, they can explore their own like comfortability in their bodies, but there should be a limit. And how like the space that they're doing that like on social media in a public setting, like it- it's good to be aware of like the dangers of the world when you are doing that.
Absolutely. Yeah, I feel like sometimes being at such a young age, they don't always realize how risky it is to over sexualize their bodies and how many people have access to that content. I feel like that's really kind of what we need. And just from listening to what you've told me now and before, and seeing what other young kids are doing, they just don't realize how dangerous it is on social media because they're thinking, oh, it's just my friends seeing it when it never truly is, no matter what platform, like TikTok, Snapchat, Instagram, any of them. You
Mhm.
said that they definitely use TikTok a lot. Do they use other media? Do they use Snapchat or Instagram? Or am I already aging myself with those platforms?
I feel like, at least from what I've noticed, Snapchat is more for messaging. Like it's kind of different from Instagram. Like when you think of Instagram, you think of people, you know, creating body standards. Whereas I feel for Snapchat, it's more for communication. But my sister, she's not allowed on TikTok anymore, but she does use Instagram. But I think it's just difficult to navigate that conversation with like kids because, or at least teenagers, because they kind of don't understand that they are in danger. Like they think that like they have more control in that, but it is something that is dangerous and something that needs to be addressed with them when they do go on the internet.
Absolutely. It should definitely be like part of like a school curriculum a little bit more than it is, I think, because it's really just lack of knowledge for a lot of it.
Yeah.
And we were talking about Instagram and TikTok just now. I was just reminded Instagram Reels has become a big thing on Instagram, kind of taking TikTok and having it all on one platform. Everyone's trying to use TikTok to leverage and get it on their own platforms.
Mhm.
Since your sister's not allowed on TikTok anymore, does she make Instagram Reels like that, or has she kind of stopped with that?
I have no idea. She blocked me on Instagram.
That's fair. She knew you were snooping for this podcast. That's why.
Yeah, but I do think like even talking to like other people in our generation, like when we were the generations that started on the internet as young kids. And I know a lot of like at least people that I know have encountered a lot of dangerous situations on the internet because, parents didn't know that they needed to like be there to navigate that. Like I know a lot of messaging apps like Kick led a lot of young kids vulnerable to, predators online.
Absolutely. Yeah. I feel like with parents, they either had no concept of it or they were so uneducated that they were like, just don't let your kids on it at all, which
Mhm.
in and of itself kind of leads a whole different system of like popularity and feeling out of the loop and all of that for kids. So that really takes away that aspect of it. Either they don't want to listen to their parents because they think that they don't know what they're talking about. So they definitely need like some education either in schools or like from older people, like from our generation, not older people, but like from us that are older than them in comparison, let me say. And yeah, I definitely agree that parents just simply did not know, so they kind of acted how they thought was best, and that's a really interesting way because now, like as our generation starts as parents and starts having kids, do you think
Mhm.
that there will be a shift in how they treat social media?
There's such an increase in social media presence in our lives now. Like that's such a main way that we communicate like with people now rather than face-to-face connections. Like it's so much easier and faster and more convenient to connect with people online. So I feel like there's some people that recognize those dangers and that will, navigate that with their kids. But there's also some people that aren't as aware. Like even with those things happening to them, like they probably think that it's still okay to be exposed to the internet. Um, yeah, I think that with the increasing presence of social media in our lives, it's hard to like take that away kind of just because of how society is, not because of like our any issues with our generation.
Yeah, I completely get that. And kind of like with society, as you mentioned, the government now trying to get through with this TikTok ban.
Mm.
Um, what are your opinions on that? How do you feel that that is going to either help or hurt anybody? What are your opinions on that?
Well, for the TikTok ban, I feel like that uh is more of an issue to do with like kind of like political racism, basically, like with the heavy like implications that TikTok is a Chinese spy app. So I feel like that has more to do with the government trying to control what we see online rather than an issue with body standards or more social issues. I feel like it has to do more with political issues.
Absolutely. I definitely see that same perspective. It's definitely more of a control issue. But do you think, like, if the United States was able to, like, get almost like a share of TikTok or anything like that, do you think that it would be kept and this whole issue would be, like, just under the rug?
With the ban of TikTok, it's kind of more like there's a cycle of social media that comes through and we get different social media to like if TikTok does get banned, I'm sure there's going to be another social media app for kids to go on, other like influencers to come out and pass on more body trends. So I think rather than it being banned and changing any views on body standards, it's more like a new app will come out and a new app will create those standards.
That's a good point. It almost kind of just recirculates everything because people always say the original TikTok was Vine and the original, like, a lot of people used Kick and before, like Discord and all these apps. So it's kind of like they're just recycling the same themes over and over again. Do you think that there is a way to kind of more intervene? I know we talked about like talking to kids about it, but sometimes they don't listen and they're like, yeah, whatever about it. Do you think that there is a way that somebody somehow could help like to mitigate this pattern and kind of get rid of this toxic cycle that we have?
Yeah, I feel like this issue isn't just rooted in social media, but it's rooted in like patriarchy. And, a lot of the ideas about women's body comes from what, you know, males or men put on, like male ideals for women's bodies. And then that gets translated throughout generations. And I think like the only way to mitigate that is to have these conversations uh, with kids too, but with adults. Because, like I said, a lot of kids look up to influencers. And if those influencers are, also passing along these preferences about body image, then it, trickles down. And that's really what affects everybody. So I feel like it's kind of hard to address because it's an issue that's like deeply rooted in patriarchy. But like that's one way that we can start.
I really like that. That's a really good point. Influencers kind of shape what happens on the internet through all like their partnerships and everything. And I was talking about in the intro before this about how some influencers are taking action, knowing their influence in this role, and promoting like women's body positivity and positive things on the internet. So we kind of need to see more of a presence of that and more educational, like factual things about how the internet works. A lot of people shift towards like body positivity, but they don't always, I've still noticed, don't really talk about why the internet does that and how that works, kind of like the mechanics of it, like you just said. And I feel like that's also for kind of obvious reasons because the patriarchal cycle of social media, they probably would not get incorporated into the algorithm that they would need to. So there are definitely a lot of different layers to this and a lot of things to fix. But influencers, even if they have a small audience and are able to appeal to that audience will eventually get bigger and hopefully help to increase the amount of awareness for the internet.
Yeah. Another thing to emphasize is also body neutrality. Appreciating our body for like what it is, because sometimes body positivity can be harder for people to start out on. It's always going to be a journey. Even now for me, it's always going to be, you're always going to have ups and downs about your bodies. But practicing body neutrality, appreciating your body for what it does and where you are at your journey is really important too.
That's a really good point. Body neutrality. Can you talk a little bit more about like what that means, body neutrality?
Yeah, so it's like this is what one of the things that we practice with our with my mentees in my mentoring club. So just being able to accept your body the way it is, and then being like thankful for your body for its functions. So it's more accepting your body rather than just trying to find the positives. So I think that's really important.
That's definitely important. So, kind of exploring all avenues of it, being thankful for what it can provide, and even if there's something it cannot provide, like working through that rather than kind of just throwing it away. Because body positivity kind of overlooks that and is like, let's just focus on the positives. But that's a really interesting point. I like that about body neutrality. We definitely need more about that because I had not really ever heard of that before. So, you definitely need to get the body neutrality out there. So,
Yeah, definitely.
this is not exactly social media, but I mean, we did a lot of online school for a while. And like, if we were to revert back, a lot of people did not even feel comfortable turning their cameras on to go to school. So this, I've noticed this kind of like in daily life. Like if somebody has a remote job in the future, they're gonna have to turn their camera on. So do you think that maybe high schools, colleges should address that concern about being able to sit with your camera on in a meeting?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a number of issues with that, like being present. Like some people might just actually not be there in the meetings. But even with like considering the pandemic, I just think with all that isolation, like it made it hard for other people to socialize. Like we were stuck in our homes. Our socialization was minimized to online, so probably a lot of texting rather than like face-to-face conversations. And I know that there have been studies looking at like how children who were, kind of like younger children that were kind of raised through the pandemic can't really recognize like facial cues as much anymore because of masking and social isolation. So I think that also plays a role into the no cameras.
Were there any comments that you wanted to make about anything related to this topic or anything that was said before or anything else?
I was also going to add that like trends are like so quick to move on. I think for I mean obviously I can't speak on men, but for women, like our body standards, they're always unachievable no matter what we do. Even like looking at the past few years, like it was so ideal for bodies to be thin. And then like Kim Kardashian era, that was when everyone wanted their bodies to be curvy and thick. And like now, even now, it's like thin again. Like we want our bodies to be thin again. So it's just hard for women to achieve body goals when they're always changing. So that also like has such like detrimental effects. So it's like a never ending, unachievable standard.
I feel like you summed it up right there in that last sentence. It really is, absolutely. You're so right that it happens so fast. Everything on social media happens fast. And
Yeah.
I feel like that has also kind of impacted our generation because they expect things to happen at such a fast speed now that when things are slow, it either gives them anxiety because because things aren't moving fast enough, or they feel like they always have to keep up or they're going to miss things, even though there will be another body trend. And you're right, especially with like physical features and being able to go like up and down like that. Like if someone was to take it extreme and like get like a surgery to get like bigger features and be curvier, then the trend is to be thin again, and now you've wasted all this time and effort to get this one body when now it's cycling through another body.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so do you think that that has had an effect too? Have you noticed like our generation kind of trying to adhere to certain body standards and then it changing while that happens?
Yeah, I mean, even like considering celebrities, like I was talking about like Kim Kardashian and like BBLs. Everyone wanted to get a BBL, but like Kim Kardashian, she has the money to reverse her BBL. Well, a lot of normal people cannot don't have that money. So it's like they're stuck with it until they can afford it again, or and it's just hard when um it's changing so much and you feel like you're getting left behind. So I think again, it's something that's rooted in patriarchy, and we need to address it at the root because it's just like never ending.
Yeah, not only patriarchy, but also it's a social class kind of thing, like a financial burden for people. Like you said, celebrities that have this money can play around with these trends and do whatever they want to their bodies. But then there's people that don't have that money that are trying to keep up, and then it's becoming a financial burden for them, and that's a whole different cycle. So definitely some very deeply rooted issues with that, and how fast that it all goes.
I also was looking into like how social media just normalizes so many bad habits for kids. Like I'll see videos on my TikTok that are like what I eat in a day, and it's like grapes for breakfast. I skipped lunch, and then like another fruit for dinner, and then kids see that and they're like, oh, this is normal. Even just like also like counting calories for kids, like kids at that age, like you don't need to worry about that.
It's so heartbreaking to hear about, but you're so right though. I've seen those videos all the time, people posting like what I eat in a day. I think that is one of the most damaging trends that social media has taken a part of. People trying to show like I eat fruits and vegetables. But then there's kids, like kids don't always enjoy fruits and vegetables, but they're like if I want to look like this person, then I have to. And it's like elementary school, middle school, all that, you're supposed to be eating those like thin strips of pizza and that little bit of soda you get at the end of the year and being totally fine with it. Like, and getting the school lunch pizza on Fridays. Like,
Yeah,
there's so many
exactly.
other things to worry about. And then just watching an influencer eat an amount of food that may be sustainable for them, but might not be sustainable for somebody else. And I feel like that's a big thing, kind of,
Mhm.
with like eating influences, that not everybody's body is the same. And yes, there are healthier foods definitely recommended to eat vegetables and fruit, but not everybody's body is the same and not everybody eats the same way. So seeing an influencer who's trying to be like, follow my life and follow my diet is really also another impossible beauty standard, because people have allergies and restrictions on their diet, and they might not be able to keep up with that, which then again is going to make them feel bad. Like, I will never be able to look like Kim Kardashian because I'm allergic to nuts or something. Like, so it's kind of solidifying that over things they can't even control.
Yeah, and I think that also like plays back into like socioeconomic status again. It's like kids in different, like economic states, like they can't afford like they can't afford healthier food sometimes. And that's the reality of it, which is sad, but like they can't always afford because fruits and vegetables are so much more expensive than junk food. We all know
Yep,
that.
yep.
But also like with those trends, like what I eat in a day, I think it's so harmful to kids because we're older, we can see that like some of those are like promoting eating disorders, but when they see that, they just think like, oh, I need to do this. So
Absolutely. And you had mentioned like racial impacts earlier. You said a lot of the kids that you mentor were black. Have you noticed that like among other races as well?
I think with my own experiences as well. As I got older, I became more appreciative of my culture, and I appreciate the like individuality that I have because of it, and how that make that that's a part of who I am now. But when I was younger, it's just like especially because there wasn't a lot of Asian kids in my school system. It was hard being like different from everyone, I think, in that aspect, and knowing that a lot of white features are the beauty standards. It's just unachievable sometimes for different races, because of genetics. So it can be hard for different races. I think now there's been more of a shift towards a lot of Asian beauty standards now too. So, but even those Asian beauty standards are rooted in white beauty standards, like having paler skin, or
Absolutely. Yeah. That's definitely a struggle when it's like your body's supposed to look exactly one way and exactly one race too on top of it. So there's so many uncontrollable factors that are really influencing kids these days.
playing into that race factor. Like even when you look at a lot of filters, like on TikTok or something, a lot of those filters are meant for white features, and you can tell when like at least when I try the filters, it's obviously not meant for my face.
That's really interesting,
Yeah.
actually. Because, I mean, I've never noticed that because I am white, but could you tell me a little more about that?
Yeah, I think like just when you use those filters, or I even see like other people commenting on it, like it's just like either the makeup on the filters won't match skin tones, or they try to shape, like a lot of the filters change your face, and they change your face into like a more like matching more white features.
That's
So
really
it's just like
interesting.
I don't really look like my race anymore when I use these filters.
So it's almost like whitewashing, like the filters are all kind of made to whitewash.
Yeah.
That's a really interesting perspective that I never even thought about. Like, yeah, that's such a good point, though. I mean, that really kind of confirms the beauty standard. Like, if you want to look beautiful online or you want to use these filters, like, that's what it looks like. I mean, I usually don't even use the makeup one, so I didn't even think about it. Like, I use, like, the big eyes one, so I'm like, that is funny for everybody. But yeah, there's a lot more of, like, the makeup
Yeah.
ones that really have that impact. Have you found any filters in the midst of that do complement like your culture and that do enhance your looks? Have you seen any that do that, or has it
Um,
all kind of been the whitewashing ones?
I mean, at least on TikTok, like because like Asian beauty has become like kind of a trend. I feel like there's some that are specifically mimicking Asian beauty and some that like, and do end up matching my features, but some still are, different. And that's only for, Asian people. Like I'm sure like black people, I don't know about any filters that they would find would match their beauty standards, but I feel like it's very telling, like how these, filters only match a certain race and make you also try to match a certain beauty standard.
And that's interesting too because like there's all kinds of problems with like white people trying to mimic like people of color and like all the racist things you see online about that. Do you think like if a white person were to use a filter that was meant for an Asian person, do you think that's a thing and people would use that to kind of exploit your race?
Um, honestly, I feel like that's more of an issue with like actually doing the makeup. Like I feel with the filters, it doesn't change your features that much that it would be, noticeable, I think. But definitely with like actual like, actual makeup doing that can change your facial features. That can be an issue. But
Okay, but the filters, in a way, remain somewhat neutral on that. Is kind of what
yeah.
you're saying. Even though it's not a perfect match, like they do it more to match like the skin tones of the race. So that's not really like a racial
Yeah.
like exploitation or anything.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's so important to address the pandemic and how socializing online has affected kids so much. I think like we're we're online all the time. We weren't allowed out of our houses. So we were online for school and then in our free times we were online. And I think that like, just having so much exposure to, you know, uh that like body standards was so detrimental to our health, especially we couldn't go out and see real people. So we only saw what we could see through a screen.
That's true. That's a really good point. The pandemic definitely had a shift, and that kind of reminds me of you talking about the third through fifth graders. Thinking how many years ago that was, they were very little, so that was their kind of first exposure to how to interact with people was through a screen.
Mhm.
So you described all those feelings that we had already having all these experiences to interact with people. That definitely must have impacted them, being that their first real experience with people.
Yeah. And I think like having these conversations with them is so important because I've this is my third semester mentoring, but I've only had that conversation with those kids because they were so like they were making comments about it every day. So we decided to have a conversation with them. But like in my other mentoring groups, we'd never like come into that topic, but it's so important to have these conversations with kids so we can practice body neutrality and body positivity, and we can teach them these things because what they learn about it is either online or from other people, and it's always good to have other perspectives, especially from like educated people on this topic.
Absolutely. That's kind of sad. Like how you were saying, it was almost like waiting until they're too far into it rather than telling them this all before they get on social media and giving them that clarity going in. They waited until the impacts have already happened and now they're trying to go back and fix all of that. So,
Yeah.
definitely more in the classroom attention from professionals on this topic is a great way to maybe shift this perspective a little bit. Thank you so much for joining me today. This has been a
Thank you for
wonderful
having me.
conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for listening. Join me next week as I talk to Professor of Psychology and co chair of the Psychology Department, Dr. Mala Madison, about the impact of skinimalism in modern day advertising.